All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on something truly powerful and, often hidden: the history of African American folk medicine. This is so much more than a story about herbal remedies. It's really a story about survival, about incredible ingenuity, and about deep, profound resistance. It's the story of how a people, enslaved and enduring the unendurable, forged their very own system of healing.
And what better way to start than with a voice right from the past? This quote is from Janie Lundrum, who was formerly enslaved. It just perfectly captures the essence of what we're talking about. On one hand, she gives a practical remedy, a chicken gizzard for indigestion. But right alongside it is a spiritual one: put an axe in the bed to cut the pain. You see that? That blend of the physical and the mystical? That's the absolute core of everything we're about to explore.
So to really get a grip on this medicine, we have to go back. We have to understand the unbelievably brutal world that made this kind of healing not just an option, but an absolute necessity. The system of American slavery was designed to control every single aspect of a person's life, and that definitely included their health.
And this chart just lays it all out, doesn't it? You can see the stark contrast. On one side, you had the plantation owner's medicine. It was often expensive, hard to get, and based on European theories that, frankly, didn't always work. And it was deeply, deeply mistrusted. But on the other side, you see what the enslaved community built for themselves: a system that was accessible, holistic, caring for both body and spirit, and built on knowledge that everyone in the community trusted. This wasn't a preference, this was a matter of life and death.
And this is so important. Healing wasn't just about getting better. It became a profound act of rebellion. Think about it. In a system that treated black bodies as property, taking charge of your own health, caring for your own community, well, that was a powerful claim to your own humanity. It was about surviving, yes, but also about finding ways to thrive against absolutely impossible odds.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. What was actually in the healer's toolkit? It was this incredibly sophisticated mix of things from the natural world and, just as importantly, from a deep spiritual worldview.
Just look at this. This shows you the incredible botanical knowledge they had. Healers knew the land like the back of their hand. They were using things like sassafras for measles, mint for stomach problems, red oak bark for fevers. This wasn't just random guessing, not at all. This was a highly developed science, a regional pharmacopoeia, passed down carefully through generations.
But here's the thing, it was never just about the plants. That knowledge was completely woven into a spiritual system, often called hoodoo or conjure. This system brought together African spiritual traditions with new knowledge from the Americas. And for the people who practiced it, there was no sharp line dividing the body and the spirit. An illness could have a spiritual root, and a spiritual problem could make you physically sick. So to truly heal, you had to treat both at the same time. You couldn't separate them.
And a picture like this really brings that connection to life, doesn't it? An altar like this wasn't just a religious display. It was a workspace. It was a place for a healer, like a root woman, to connect with the spiritual power they needed to figure out what was wrong, to gather the right herbs, and to create remedies that could heal both the body and the soul.
And wow, the toolkit was so much more than just herbs. It shows this incredible resourcefulness. You had amulets made from knotted strings for protection, but then look at the last two items on this list. Roasted turnips for frostbite, a totally practical treatment, and even using maggots to clean infected wounds. That's a technique that modern medicine has actually rediscovered. It shows this incredible pragmatism working side by side with spiritual belief.
So you have to ask, right? Who were these brilliant healers? And how on earth did they protect and pass down all this complex knowledge? They had no medical schools, no textbooks, and they were living under the constant threat of the slave system.
Well, it really was a whole community effort. You had different people playing these essential roles. Midwives were the absolute experts on childbirth and women's health. You had herb doctors or root doctors, who were like the pharmacists and physicians. Grannies, these respected elder women, were basically the living libraries of the community. And conjurers were the spiritual levers, the ones you went to for the deepest causes of illness or bad luck.
And this knowledge, it was always alive, always evolving. It started with those core traditions brought over from Africa. Then, here in the New World, it was enriched by this vital exchange with Native American communities who shared their own expertise about the local plants. And all of it, every single bit, was passed down orally, from elder to child, generation after generation.
This first-hand account from a woman named Melinda, it just says it all, doesn't it? This wasn't happening in some formal classroom. This knowledge was woven into the very fabric of daily life. It was a child learning at their grandmother's knee, just watching, listening, and absorbing a tradition that would quite literally ensure the survival of their people. All right, so let's tie all these threads together. What's the real legacy of this rich tradition? When you look at the whole picture, it's this incredible story of resilience and empowerment.
At the end of the day, practicing this kind of medicine was an assertion of humanity. It allowed people who were legally defined as property to take control of their own bodies, to care for their own families, and to define for themselves what it meant to be well. It was a space of autonomy in a world that offered them none.
And that legacy is also just so deeply spiritual. A huge part of this whole tradition is ancestor reverence, this belief that the spirits of those who came before you are still here, guiding you, protecting you, and empowering you. That belief was a source of strength that slavery just couldn't break.
And you know, this story doesn't just stop when the Civil War ends. These practices evolved, they endured, and they continued to serve African American communities as a source of healing, of spiritual strength, and of cultural identity for generations and generations after emancipation.
And that really brings us to our final thought here. This whole history of having to create a parallel medical system out of sheer necessity, a system built on community, trust, and resistance, it's not just a story about the past. It leaves us with a really critical question for today. How does this legacy, this history of medical self-reliance and earned mistrust of institutions, continue to shape the relationship between the Black community and the healthcare system today? It's a question that is absolutely worth our deep consideration.